and welcome. Women representation on boards in India has increased by nearly 6% over 6 years. In 2015, women's representation on boards was a little over 11%, and it went up over 17% in 2021. Now, this is a new gender diversity report from global financial services company Credit Suisse. Now, this number is still significantly below the global average of 24%. This report analyzed the gender breakdown of 33,000 senior executives from over 3,000 companies across 46 countries. Stock market regulator in India, SEBI, requires that the top 1,000 listed companies by market cap have a woman board member who's also an independent director. Now, this mandate has improved women's numbers at the board level somewhat. But are leaders only those who are on corporate boards, women in the C-suite? And is there a dearth of women leaders in India? I'm Maloni Bhatt, and I have with me two women bosses to give us some perspectives. Simi Sabhani, Chief Growth Officer, Dentsu. Simi, welcome.
Thank you.
And Anu Acharya, founder and CEO of Map My Genome. She was awarded the Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum in 2011. Thanks very much, Anu, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Simi, first question to you. Advertising and media agencies for long were dominated by men. Now, is it still the case? Is it still a boys' club? And what are some of the challenges that you've encountered?
So, yes, the advertising and media industries literally infested with boys' club culture. So I remember, and lots of stuff that we are going to speak today, I think, comes from personal experiences, and and how one tried navigating those systems. So I think the choice before me was really, do I either beat it, or I join it, or I navigate it? And I went through this in my head, and I said, beating it requires a lot of, it's a drain on your energy. Frankly, time is finite and energy is finite. And, and I was not one who wanted to just take things head on. That was one. The second bit was join it, which was definitely not an option for me. I was not keen on doing that. And the third was navigate it. And when I say that, I'll tell you what I mean by it. I think pretty much most bosses want people in their teams who keep troubles out, who keep problem out, and who ensure that, whatever work you're doing, and I was in client management. So the whole idea was, how do you ensure that the work on the table is so delightful that the client literally has had a great equation with the agency, and the boss is kept out of any problems, right? So I think where I kind of decided to focus my energy on was to ensure that there's great work that's placed on the table, and I have a happy and delightful client to work with, and stay out of the so-called boys' club culture. Having said that, I think the next bit that I would like to bring to the table is that if you were to really deconstruct this boys' club, what exactly is it? Okay, there's a lot of banter, there's fun, there's networking, all that is all right. But then it comes at the cost of excluding women. Even that, even if you were to say, okay, fine. I mean, we have great fun with girlfriends, possibly they have great fun with boyfriends, and, there is such locker room conversation, which sometimes crosses a certain level, which is absolutely not on. But having said that, I think where it hurts the most is when that becomes a power game. That's not acceptable, because there would be times that, we would have struggled through the day and evening and come up with something, only to discover the following morning that men over a drink have changed it all. If it happens once or twice, you say, okay, ideas can strike a person at any point of time, day or night. If ultimately the client is going to benefit, it's all right. Till you start realizing, no, it's a pattern. It's a pattern that's getting formed. It's almost rubbishing all the effort that has gone onto the table through the day. And that's not all. So I think...
So how do you navigate that, Simi?
Yes, so how you navigate, now those are the times you take it head on. Because now you're talking work. you cannot stop somebody from banter and social networking, but you can stop them when that's starting to seep into the work culture, and it's going to get your team and yourself demotivated. That's not on. So that's the time I think, one said, okay, this is not on, guys. It's absolutely not acceptable. Otherwise, you guys do the work through the day. I mean, it's as simple as that. I can, put up my legs and have a great time through the day. And I think that did not. So that's what they took it in the right spirit. Let's face it, they did take it in the right spirit. So what I believe, so when going back to what doesn't work is when there's a power equation that gets formed, or where there are certain decisions that get taken or policies that get framed by this set of boys over a drink. I think the only way one can kind of really challenge that is to say, we're okay with the concept of club. It could be a mixed gender club. It could be a club which is based on certain common interests. I know of organizations who actually put together teams which are based on certain interest levels, which is damn good, because then that team starts ideating with each other. There's a lot of cross-pollination that happens. So I think in concept, the club culture is a great culture, but it's the boys which needs to really be sifted out. Yes, so I'm saying,
girls can form their own club.
Pardon? And girls can form their own club, but I believe it's not about boys versus girls. It's more about inclusion. I think it's much richer culture when boys and girls come together. So I come from a co-ed background, and some of my best buddies are boys. And I just think it's great fun when boys and girls come together and work together. And it can be very, very healthy. The problem is if it's, okay, you're doing your bit, so I'm going to do my bit. Then I don't think the twain will ever meet. So at least I'm for one which says mixed gender wherever possible. So possibly till such time women start taking the senior leadership positions, the cohort which actually takes certain very important decisions for an organization should possibly have women even from mid-levels, simply because there aren't too many people at the senior level. Till such time we equip them and get them to come to that level, they cannot be avoided, because otherwise, we'll never be able to catch up. The other bit in this area, where at least I have a very strong point of view, is while we have to actively work towards, a kind of a 50% representation, but it should never be seen as reserved seats. It's like the woman has to feel, I've run the race and I've come first. It's not because you kept that 50% seats and somehow you were looking for people to fill those slots.
Quota system is what you're saying.
Pardon, I can't hear that. What did you say? Just repeat.
It's not a quota system.
It cannot be a quota system, because that again is not very, it's humiliating. It's, you very much want to know, and you want the world to know that you ran the race and you came first. It's not that you came first because it came on a platter for you. So that's the other bit. Yeah, so I would imagine I've answered your question. I hope I have. I did meander a little.
You have, and I'm sure, Anu, you have your views on this, and we'll come back to those. But in India, out of 136 unicorn startup founders, only 5 are women. And as a founder yourself, what, according to you, are the challenges specific to women within the startup ecosystem?
So I think the first thing is that unicorn is basically a valuation thing. So it is not that they have done better as entrepreneurs than somebody else. It is just that somebody valued them at X amount. So I think we shouldn't, just because of the status of reaching that, I think we shouldn't really consider that the women are not doing as well. I think but within that ecosystem, if you look at the unicorns, I think there is 1 or 2 that stand out, and they have done better than all the men as well, right? So if you look at Nykaa, I think it's the only one that the founders have retained a very significant holding and have also created an absolutely fantastic company, right? So I think maybe there are many more in the making. It's just that we haven't yet reached that level yet, right? So I think that one.
Just want to come in on this at this point. Now, you said that a unicorn is a way some startups have been valued, and it's a tag. But there are a lot of startups that have women as leaders.
I think there are a lot, I mean, that's increasing quite significantly. But I think the challenges for women have always been in the fundraising part, right? I think, raising capital has always been a challenge for multiple reasons, right? There are reasons that maybe if you talk to women, they'll say we've been pitching a lot, but we are not seeing as many, deals that happen. So I think it is a two-way problem that we need to get both the fundraising needs to increase for women in general, right? And whether it is from making sure that enough people are approaching the right sort of capital, houses, or whether it is them not looking at it from a biased point of view, or whatever it is, right? So I'm saying that part has definitely been a challenge. We are still, if you look at the numbers are already very tiny before the pandemic, and I think that became worse during the pandemic. So I think there is definitely a challenge with the fundraise problem, and I think that automatically connects with the valuation game, because ultimately that's what you get valued when you raise capital, right? But having said that, I think what we have found is, like, especially in the spaces that I am in, life sciences and healthcare. I think some of the best known names are women. You take Kiran Mazumdar, or you take Amira Shah, or you take anybody, right? I think even in Hyderabad, where we are present, and now in many other cities, I think when I look at healthcare, a lot of organizations are headed by women. Maybe they're not yet, some of them are unicorns, some of them are not, but some are public companies, some are not. So I think there are enough women, but we need to increase those numbers. And I think that can be done. And some of it will happen naturally, because if you look at a younger generation, I think you see that confidence in a lot of the young women that we see today. That will be the first step. The second step is that, there are some, as we start seeing more success stories, I think there'll be a lot more confidence on people to actually invest, because ultimately, I think anybody who's investing in people, they're investing to get back returns. And I think, that will increase the confidence on people to invest in more women. That will be the second part. And the third will be that I think that if we have more women investing themselves, I think we'll see a lot more of women being invested into, right? So I think that is, some of it is already happening, but some of it needs to actually we need to make certain changes systematically so that it will actually happen. So there is one challenge is that, there are a lot of women entrepreneurship schemes and a lot of things that are there, but many of them are not, they don't go as deep into trying to find out what happened and to be able to take it to the next level. So I think over the last few years, I think I've also been involved with quite a lot of such, some of the initiatives, some of them noteworthy ones. For instance, there's V-Hub in Telangana that looks at a lot of the women, seeing what challenges are there, how to mentor them, and so on.
Yeah.
So I think we will see that over the next 5 years. I think we will definitely see a lot more happening. And in certain segments like healthcare and others, I think, because you're providing a service, trying to understand, I think we have already started to see that there are many more women that are coming. And I think over the next 5 years, we'll probably see that at least increase by 20-30% is my guesstimate.
This is disheartening that when it comes to encouraging women-led businesses, the schemes which exist lack depth, as you point out, Anu. But Simi, that brings me to my question for you. Can leadership be inculcated among women from an early age? And will that improve the incidence of women in leadership positions? What are some of the most important leadership traits, for example, that you might have imbibed?
Absolutely. Leadership can be inculcated at an early stage. In fact, I think that's the best stage to inculcate it. And it starts right from school, where, so what are those basic traits that make for a leader going forward, or even when you're young and in school? The first is really, it stems from confidence. And I think the only way, I shouldn't be saying the only way, but one of the very important ways to get confident is when you are given forums to present your point of view. So whether it's taking part in a debate, whether it's as simple as thought for the day, at the assembly, where you're facing the entire school, even if it's just those 2 sentences that you need to speak, but you're facing the audience, you're carrying yourself with confidence. I think that's so important because it goes a long way. The fact that you're the one who's going to put forth the point of view of the class to the class teacher, or walking into the principal's room, and all these interactions are not more than a minute or 2, but they are just so important to just make you feel more and more confident about your own self. And that's why I say it's so important to do it right in school. Having said that, it's not like there are certain templates of leaders. Talking about how has my leadership changed over the years. Like when you are in your 20s, of course, you have no fear in any case at that stage. You're not conditioned in any way. So it's so beautiful when you're just not conditioned, right? There is nothing really to follow. You just bring yourself to your workplace. So you're not so inhibited, and I think you're much more spontaneous as a person, right? You're also much more friendly, and those are the kind of traits. Then as you start growing up, you understand the art of negotiation, the art of navigation, you understand all of that. You figure out how to battle the microaggressions, so those are all things you start, because now you start seeing the big bad world. And you start figuring out how to ensure that none of that is going to suppress your dreams, your desires, your ambitions. And I think then comes the time when you start empowering your team. So you take the back seat. You're holding the can, but yet you're empowering your team. But I think after a certain point of time, you're back to, and that at least that's a stage that I see myself very often now, is where you're leading from the front. You have to demonstrate. Because you just start, you get even more aware that there are lots of people who are looking up to you, or you somewhere end up, setting examples, and therefore you have to be much more responsible, and you have to demonstrate. So yes, so I think leadership traits keep changing as you keep growing, but your basic DNA doesn't change. And I think the beautiful thing of what women bring to the table is they have a fine art of being polite and firm. You can have your poise and elegance and grace. You need not really hide it. In fact, I think you should just put it out there, because it's such a breath of fresh air after having listened to aggressive conversations in a conference room. And then when you hear a voice, which is voice of reason, which is put forth in a gentle fashion, it gets heard. At least I've seen that. I don't think that's so. Yeah. So my message always to the young girls is, you don't need to necessarily behave like boys. If you don't need to behave whatever is your natural self. And at this point, again, what I'm reminded of a great boss that I had in my growing years. We were 6 of us reporting it to him. All 6 had different ways of writing our presentations, different way of presenting, different ways of conducting ourselves. He never wanted to create 6 clones of him. He gave each of us enough space to ensure that we did the best of whatever we had. So really helped us blossom. And that's what, again, I'm saying, as leaders, you just need to bring your best. And I think I hear myself say very often, when you're handling people who are in their 30s and 40s, you cannot be sitting and plugging the weaknesses, because they're fairly solid in what they are, whichever way they are. So forget about plugging weaknesses, exploit their strengths. Ensure that you draw the maximum of what they can offer, rather than, again, back to finite energy and finite time. Just figure out how you use it. So yeah, that's about leadership and different styles.
You brought in a very important point, mentorship, and especially any sort of mentorship may be provided by a man, or mentorship provided by a woman, and how important it is, to groom young people and young leaders. Anu, a report by Bain and Company shows that 73% of women-run enterprises in India were hit negatively by COVID-19. And the EPW says that 10.9, so nearly 11% of women-led businesses closed down during the first lockdown itself. Now, we know that the impact of the pandemic has been, much higher, worse on women entrepreneurs as opposed to their male counterparts. What have you seen in the startup ecosystem?
So I think that, one of the things, and not just in the startup ecosystem, I think even amongst the women employees of our company and others, I think one of the things that was probably, when it came to kids, and kids didn't have school, so most of that came on to the women. And as a result, I think they were not able to come to the office. And while from the IT perspective, I mean, if you're in an IT company, I think everybody was working from home. But when you look at healthcare and many other cases, I think all employees actually came back to work, right? So for women, it became harder to come back to work because of the reasons that there were no creches open, there is no schools open, and not everybody has nannies that they can trust, and nannies couldn't come in either. So I think one was definitely that became a big challenge. The second was that, when everything is affected, I think, even in the startup ecosystem, like I mentioned, I think the funding became even worse in the beginning. Now, actually, there's a lot of capital in the market. So hopefully, whatever was not there for a while, I think, it's a great time to actually raise capital in this market. But I think it actually affected the women more because of the same reasons that I mentioned earlier, which was that the availability of capital is low. People were not able to go out and meet people, so you are not able to go out and actually meet investors. You're doing everything virtually. Some of that has a positive impact and some of it has a negative impact, right? Because if you know somebody already, then you probably are, it's okay to do it on a virtual call. If you didn't know some of the people already, then it became harder to actually schedule that call and get that funding going. So I think that has been a challenge. The second has been that, when you look at a lot of aspects of how you meet a lot of people when you do physical meetings, right? Whether it is mentorship, whether it's something else. So those connections were missing, especially during this time. And not just for women, I think it happened for men as well. So I wouldn't say that, it is specifically a women problem, but I think it was in general a problem that every entrepreneur faced. But at the same time, I think what we also saw was that people were actually doing deals on Zoom, talking to people on Clubhouse or Twitter or whatever other means. So I think a new way of getting to making connections, a new way of working emerged in the startup ecosystem as well. So I think certain things were bad, I think, and it became worse. But I think for certain segments, especially like healthcare and others, I think it was probably a better opportunity and a better way of being able to present yourself in a situation that probably would not have been otherwise, because most healthcare companies did relatively well during this time frame as well.
Simi, McKinsey 2021 report on women in the workplace found that women were promoted to managerial levels at far lower rates than men. This makes it nearly impossible for companies to lay a foundation for sustained progress, to get women to more senior positions. How do we change that?
So I think the only way to change this is that the HR practices and policies have to be absolutely uniform. I mean, this is actually very shocking when I hear it, because this is something that, at least in the two workplaces that I've spent bulk of my life in, we've not witnessed it. And it is absolutely a no-no. If you fall in a certain band, there's no question of getting paid less because you're a woman. Yes, it's within a band. So to that extent, it's not that, you would match penny to penny. But, and the range, rather, you could be on any end of the spectrum, depending on how you're kind of rated or reviewed or assessed, but not because you're a man or a woman. So I think the practices that we have for our organizations are like, it's the level which you fix, and it's not whether it's a man or a woman. So to my mind, it's as simple as that. I mean, with your eyes shut, you just have to fix the level. There's no concept of, that's one, but obviously if the report says what it says, there is truth to it, and it's happening in many organizations, of course. Possibly, this is where, again, a woman needs to raise her voice. That's where she needs to ask for it. I have seen that most women are very embarrassed about talking money. Well, for that matter, even I have been. Not that I've ever been shortchanged, but I remember when the letter is given to you, you just want to get out of the room after that. You don't even want to open the letter and review it. And you come and very sheepishly look at it. More often than not, I've been happy with it, but that's not the point. The point is that it doesn't even cross my mind that there could be a negotiation possibility. You just take it and say thank you. And so I don't know, I think that's to do possibly with conditioning over the years, that you feel kind of silly about talking money. I don't know. So, this is a tricky question for me, because I know I've also been a little sheepish and shied away from such conversations. And my, the reasoning used to be, the man sitting on the chair has no axe to grind with me. And he's happy, and I've got a great appraisal. So it must be good, this must be the right one, So absolutely wrong person to ask this question.
Yeah, because Anu's had to negotiate, right? When it comes to funding and stuff like that.
Maybe Anu's
so, Anu, do you just take the envelope and say, hey, thanks very much, and then, as Simi said, sheepishly go look at it?
I knew that she...
Not at all. Not at all. So I had to tell the first time I got a job offer, I remember it was on email, and I just graduated. I was in Chicago. I got a job offer. And this was an entry-level position in in some sort of something. So they offered me X amount of money, and I had not dealt with HR before that. But I got a letter, and I looked at it, and I was like, "What rubbish!" So I sent out an email right then saying, "You don't know who you're talking to," and it wasn't exactly like that, but basically it sounded like, "You don't know who you're talking to. You better give me something that I deserve." And so the HR writes back to me saying that's not a way how you approach, HR, and you really need to be aware that this is. And then I said, yeah, that's fine. And next thing I get is a $10,000 raise. So this was my first job offer. I didn't take the job, but I think it was the first time that I was offered. And I think every time someone has come to me, I think it's very, very important to negotiate. That was a bad negotiation, but I still got a raise. After that, I think I've never really, anytime someone's offered something, I think when it is, you have to actually stand out there and say that you walk away if the offer is not right. And I think I've done that many times. So you can walk away, when you are fine, you're traveling, for instance, you're raising money. And if you don't find the valuation appropriate, you walk away, right? And it's not the end of the world. And I think that's the thing that you have to look at, that, you be fair, but it doesn't mean you should be shortchanged. And you have to stand up for yourself. I think a lot of times I've seen even, it's not that women don't ask. Many times when we've made offers, a lot of women come back and ask. And I like those women who come back and ask, because that, even when it comes to talking for the organization, maybe they will be the ones that I can send out and get them to do that. So I think it's a good thing. And I think that more women need to do that. I think it's important that they understand, not that they should say that if you are at X, you should, just because you feel like it, you will get at 3X. But if everybody is getting it at 1.5X, you shouldn't be at X, right? So I think that's the thing, that you have to understand that what your value is in the market and ask. And if you're right, you'll get it. If you're not, you won't get it. It's as simple as that. And so it's very important that, stand up there, stand up for yourself and ask. And it's never going to be the end of the world, because there are many different ways to go about it. So don't feel shy.
Yeah. So then, Anu, would you agree to this, that women are promoted on performance while men are promoted on potential? Now, how true is this based on your experience?
Well, I guess it depends on the organization. But there was one interesting thing. I haven't yet talked a little bit about the DNA aspect of it. I think I heard Simi mention DNA somewhere. So it was an interesting study that was done. and especially done in the context of entrepreneurship, right? So there are certain traits that make you more, risk friendly, in some form, and there are other things like, how do you make decisions and all that. So a lot of that is there in your DNA. The interesting thing that was found in that study was 35 to 40% of women are primarily become entrepreneurs because of their inherent abilities, which basically means that their DNA and a few other things. But men were also getting, whether it was doing well or whether it was getting a capital raise or being an entrepreneur, was also based on the environment, because the environment was more friendlier towards them. So that was an interesting aspect of what came out of that study. That while it was not very different, that you found that it was better in women versus men. On the DNA side, it was same. But what was different was that the environment was different for men versus the women. And I think that's, if you can just change the environment, I think you'll have a better outcome when it comes to it. And we are seeing, a lot of women who have done very well have shown as examples. So I think all we need to do is to change the environment a little bit. And I think that will result in a much better outcome for everybody, because clearly, I think having a diverse set of people coming together always brings better outcomes. And I think that's part of what I believe strongly is where innovation strikes. It's part of how you get ideas. It's part of how you really can do very well as an organization. So I think there is truth to that whole aspect, but I think it's very important that we change the environment a little bit to be more friendlier to everybody. And now I think not just men, women, but anyone who's whatever gender they subscribe to.
Yes, absolutely. But it's also very demoralizing, isn't it? That if the only thing that keeps women or girls from achieving is environment, and it's really sad then that we cannot provide that for our girls. It links to what Simi said earlier. We need to encourage our girls right from school. And Anu has made a point that we need to build this facilitative environment. But Simi, you come from this cutthroat media agency background. How easy or tough would you say it has been, or it is, to build this invigorating and safe environment for women?
So I think it, ultimately an organization is really its set of people, right? It's the set of people that you work with, you report into, the guy at the helm, the HR. Frankly, that's really what the organization is, and that's what promotes the work culture. I think the way it has worked for me, and at least what I see myself doing as well, is to ensure that you form mini groups and give, it's literally mini jurisdictions to people to kind of lead, so that they just get more and more comfortable with the concept of leading. And it could be leading a books club. It could be leading, maybe a Friday event. It could be leading a small brainstorming session or a new pitch, whatever. Just give them those opportunities as often as possible, the way they start leading, because that's when a lot of leadership traits come to the fore, and they figure out how to kind of get more and more comfortable. That's one. The other thing I've seen, when I spot potential, but the person thinks that he or she cannot, I actually throw them at the deep end with the very clear, I know I've got her back, but I actually say, hey, there is absolutely no negotiation on this. You need to take this pitch and run with it. Come to me whenever you want, and at every stage you can come, you can check all of that. But there is no better way than letting the person realize for himself or herself what is the true potential, and to actually go and face the world. And of course, at that big forum, you've pretty much got that person's back. If there's any tricky question that comes her way, and you're not going to wait for her to get baffled and rattled, and it's like a snakes and ladders game. At the critical juncture, you will ensure you step in if required. But I've seen it's always helped. And some of the people, when I now look back and I see what they're doing now, it gives me such a joy and sense of pride when I see the way those girls have blossomed. And at some forum, when you ever need to talk to young leaders, I'll introduce you to them. They're absolutely fantastic. And I think that's what worked. It was just throw them at the deep end. That's the best way to swim, and that's the best way to come out a winner and really feel good about it. And yeah, so that works. And I know I'll continue doing it.
Power to you, to do it and to mentor young leaders, be it men or be it women. Baranu, I want to come back to you. Simi was talking about how one can promote and mentor people to leadership positions. But it can also be very difficult to be the first and only woman on a board and to bring a different kind of a perspective. You've been someone who's held boardroom positions. Now, can you tell us, what are the challenges that women on boards or in leadership positions, especially on boards, what are the challenges that you face?
So luckily for me, I think I had a great mentor who's a woman, and she's been on my board for the last 10 plus years. And I think we got her for whatever reason, she was doing a search for us when she was doing a diligence on us, and we found her. So I think for me, it has been great because I always had her in our board as well, along with me. Even when we had a 11-member board in my previous organization, and the fact that I'm the CEO, I think makes it easier for me to put my point forward. But having said that, I think there are times when it's challenging, and it's not just for women; it's for men as well. You have investors; everybody has their own interests, and you'll have to make sure that you don't create an environment that allows you to be subdued in a way, right? So I think that is there. The second is that, if you are an entrepreneur, I think it's important that you bring in the right kind of balance on your board. So today, for instance, I have a 4-member board. 3 of them are independent, and it's me. 50% are women, 50% are men. And the men also are outstanding people who have, who are willing to mentor and who have don't have anything really any sort of anything outside of the organization to see it prosper. So I think it's very important how you choose your board, and how do you make sure that you make the best out of it. But make sure that you have a board that's diverse, that can add in the right kind of mix of people. And it's the same whether you started at the board level versus at the leadership level in your organization, whether it is at the junior levels or anything. Because too much of the same kind of people will always lead to a problem, right? And I think getting that balance is an important aspect. So I'll give one example of when we started Map My Genome, and this was because this was my second company, and a lot of the women actually transferred with me from Ossimum to Map My Genome. So in the beginning, it became a very women-heavy organization, right? So the first couple of years, we had more women than men. And you could see the same problems that women face when they are the single person in the room versus when men became when a man became a single person in the room. So I think when we made a conscious choice, we made sure that there was an equal distribution of people. And I said, don't stereotype the job positions, whether it is HR, whether it's reception, whether it is admin, whether it's software or anything else. Ultimately, I think we now have a fairly good balance of both. There are a little bit more men now than women, but I think it has come to a point where it is a lot more equal. And I think it's when the organization starts to function well. So I think that's where I believe that one has to make a conscious decision that you are not necessarily creating a bias just because of people like you. Right. And when I said people like you, I was telling my team that don't just hire somebody because you feel they are like you. Hire someone because they should not be like you, and bring in something different from you. And I think that was an important message to send out, and I think that continues to be a message that we send across the organization.
Right. Let me tie this into the question that I have for Simi. Anu spoke about how they're trying to tackle biases at leadership levels. But, when it comes to hiring, for instance, gender blind job screenings, there have been several other interventions. Now, these programs don't often address the gender biases that may exist,
right?
Or underlying mindsets that may already exist in an organization.
Yeah.
Now, as a leader, what are some of the things that you've incorporated, that you believe are a must for any organization, in order for them to be able to at least rise above their biases?
Yeah, so I think battling the biases and stereotypes, are so critical. I've had instances where people have come to my room and said, this girl is very, very good, but she'll not be able to work late into the night, and we'll have to end up trying to organize cars to drop. I mean, a car to drop her. So I said that cannot be the grounds to kind of rule her out of this position. I mean, that's not the. If you say that there's another guy on, who's good on XYZ parameters and far better, I can understand. But surely if this is the only box she's not ticking, that we have to take that extra effort to ensure that, she reaches home safely, then sure, that'll be done. But you cannot not hire the woman for reasons like these. So that's one. Number two, and this is something I must say, I've seen a huge change. The first few years when I got into this industry and when I, interview young candidates, I would see girls slightly timid and not really forthcoming. And, I'd actually started conducting interviews at home to just make them very, very comfortable with the environment. So that, because ultimately all that I wanted to see, what's the best that she can offer. And I did not want at times a certain surroundings to kind of intimidate her. And some of the very good hires I ended up making during that period were women who I'd actually interviewed at home. But that was many, many years ago. Today, when I look at it, the confidence with which the girls come in, it's like they rule the world. And it's so heartening to see that. So I think lots has changed. Lots from then to now has changed in terms of the whole demeanor, the whole body language, and their whole confidence. And and Anu definitely represents the much younger generation. And when she said that, of course, there are girls, the way they negotiate, and I see that in the younger generation, and it's very, very heartening. So I have noticed this. And of course, the other bit is where you have to hold your HR team accountable when it comes to diversity and inclusion. It's all fine to have these tall statements made in yearly speeches, but ultimately what's happening? What's the ground reality? Is it really happening? Is it getting converted? And that's one bit. The other thing I also see at times, women leaders, the mid-level women leaders who are not actually supporting the junior girls. Because again, maybe it's the yin and yang that you require. Maybe because they feel that, if I'm also not going to stay late and the girl reporting into me is not going to stay late, how's it going to happen? Again, those are biases. Those you need to bust those things at every level. So, and again, quoting from my personal example, maybe I would have never been where I am if I did not experience that one incident, which was the most defining incident in my life. I was expecting, and I was actually proceeding for my maternity leave. And I walked into my boss's room with a letter saying that, hey, I need to put in my papers because I don't think I can come back. I mean, I have, once the child is born and my parents are not in the same city, where am I going to leave the child and come? So he took the letter and put it in the drawer. And he said, we'll talk about it after 3 months. And I'm not accepting it, but I'm not going to sit and argue with you. So I'm just putting it back in the drawer. In those 3 months, I realized that, hey, I have life ahead. And all that I need to do is ensure that, there's the right nanny at home, because I can't be changing nappies and feeding the child all day long. This is not life for me. And let me figure out how to rejig and, the environment, my work environment, and whatever it takes to be able to get home on time. But I have to get back to office. And I went back to him after 3 months. I said, I just need 1 more month to get back. Those were the days when maternity leave was for three months. Right. I said, I just need another month and I'll be back. And then there was no looking back after that. But if that had not happened, if he'd accepted the letter, possibly I would have slipped into complacency. Or I don't know. I don't know where it would have taken. I have no clue. But when I look back, I say, you know, that one act of his was so helpful. Number two, what I realized is that, at least in our industry, where, you know, you're dealing with various disciplines, various departments, various people, if you are fairly decent on your interpersonal skills and you think you've communicated right, you don't need to really sit and kind of follow up at every, or on every job, or every action that you need to kind of undertake. So I started reusing the, you know, the power of phone is something I discovered then, you know, and this is many, many years ago, where it was that give crystal clear brief and go back home and do your follow-ups on the phone, so that, you know, and over lunch, I at that point of time never decided to take these 1 hour stipulated lunch breaks. There was no such thing. I would work my ass off through the day. But at 6 o'clock, I would get up and go. And the whole thing was that give me the clear-cut deliverables. Those will be met, but I'm not going to earn brownies by sitting late at night and working just so that my boss sees I'm working. That's not going to happen. And I need to draw a balance. And that's why I think I keep saying that that's when I decided the art, or rather learned the art of balancing, you know, the work-life balance that everybody talks about. But yeah, so that was a very, very defining moment, and I can never forget that. And I think I owe it to many women out there to understand at what stage in their lives do they need that little help, that little push, so that they do not get back to just running their homes. And then when they get back to work environment after many, many years, it takes a long time to catch up. It takes really a long time to catch up. And what you feel sad about is because you knew that she had the same potential as a counterpart had, who has now reached certain levels. And because she did not get the right support at the right time, or she did not get the so-called flexibility that she needed, she, you know, lost out. So I think that, according to me, that's the important part that most organizations need to provide in people they see potential. Yeah.
Anu, you know, this brings me to my last question. And this is essentially, do you think this culture, is it easier to sort of set it out in a startup? Because, you know, you're just beginning. I mean, you don't have legacy issues and stuff like that. So, you know, ensuring that, you know, there are fewer biases. Is it easier for a startup?
Absolutely. I think it's much easier because you don't have, you know, whatever the legacy systems of, you know, people, the way they actually think about promotion, the way, so everything can be actually created at that time. And I think that makes the biggest difference, because that's what I said when we started. I think, you know, creating the right board, creating the right set of this thing, understanding and recognizing that we had certain biases, making sure that we could make those changes within our HR policies, making sure that, you know, when in a room, I think like Simi was mentioning, some people are timid, some people speak up. I think it was giving them that opportunity to be able to, you know, speak. And now, for instance, when we have our management meetings, we make every leader, you know, be that person who presents for that week, and then have a discussion. And that way it gives everybody a chance to sort of not just be a spectator in a room, but actually to be the one that leads that charge. So I think it is about, you know, putting those little nudges within the organization, making sure that you recognize what is happening, and make sure that that is something that you can tell. And it's easier when, you know, there are people at the top that are also understand that those biases, and it becomes easier to then percolate it down. It's harder to do that in a, let's say, a 100-year organization, because, you know, clearly you can't just come in and say, I'm going to change everything here, because everything takes time to happen. But I think even over there, I think you can do it. It's just a little bit harder and it will be in a startup.
Right, Simi, and final comments. Simi, you go first. You know, the premise of this discussion was, is there a dearth of women leadership? We've clearly established that, you know, environment factors, and there are many other things that go into really encouraging leadership. And maybe there is a gap there that we need to fill. But, you know, final thoughts and comments from you, and then after you, Anu.
Yeah. So like I said, I think a couple of times, for me, it starts from the school. And I think if all of us as leaders can start playing a role at the grassroots level, we will make a difference. So catch them young, mentor them at that level. You are sure to have great leaders thereafter. But, where every kid is born equal, if every kid gets an equal opportunity, there would be no issue at all. So it starts from education. So I think that's where it all starts. And I'm not saying it ends there, it starts there. Of course, there is lots that, as you go forward, you need to do it. Yes, in work environment, we've touched upon a lot of things that we need to do. Anu talked about, giving everybody almost an opportunity to kind of present. And like I said, I believe facing audience, presenting your point of view, gives you the confidence and depletes the fear factor. And that's really the step one towards them, raising the bar for them. But yeah, but if all of us in some ways can start playing a role with young little girls at home, friends' daughters, in schools, we will have a great life ahead, because at that point of time, they're not conditioned. We need to keep it. There's a lovely campaign done by Always, Like a Girl. You must have a look at that. And it's absolutely beautiful. And I think that got me thinking a lot when I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, I obviously echo a lot of the sentiments that Simi just mentioned. I think I have two girls, one who is working now and who's a 20-something-year-old, and another who's a 15-year-old. And I think both of them are clearly way more aware of the world and everything else around it than I was probably at that age. Of course, I think I was also brought up in a household that we were three girls and a boy, and there were constant debates at home, which encouraged us to think. There were books that surrounded us. It was an environment that sort of didn't have any, inhibition on, what you can do as a girl versus a boy. So I think those are the most important and the formative, moments of your life. And I think beyond that, I think it's also your peer group that you select, because if you select the right kind of peers as your friends in high school and your and college, I think what you see is that that sort of also defines how you behave in the next few years of your life as well. And if you haven't been fortunate enough to have a home that has been as accommodating or not accommodating, I would say that was encouraging you to be able to be yourself and giving you those choices at that time. I think if you find a workplace that does allow you to make those choices, I think that is an important step. So I think it is like a pyramid. The easier it is when you are at the bottom and you are given those choices to make. You make those decisions yourself. There have been instances when my dad used to allow me to make mistakes and then tell me later that I let you do it, because if I did not, you would keep thinking that, I didn't let you make decisions. And I think that has helped me. So I think anything that you did at early ages is much easier. And then when you go to the top, it becomes harder and harder if you haven't let that child, be who she is and feel that she's an equal amongst all her peers. So I think that's an important step. So we have to start at the very, very basic bottom. But I think there are steps that we can take at every level of this pyramid and make sure that we have turn it around and make the funnel bigger.
Anu, a fantastic point that you made on it being a pyramid. And, it's easier when you are sort of growing up for you to be able to make mistakes. That's what I caught. And then, as you go higher and higher up, it becomes more and more challenging for you to make those mistakes and to correct those mistakes. So maybe right at the bottom, it's, you should let the girl be. And, you gave that example of your father. So Simi Sabhani and Anu Acharya, thank you so very much for a very, very interesting conversation. And my big takeaway is, Simi, your line, catch them young. Anu, I'm never going to forget, negotiate for the money that you think you're worth. So two great takeaways and many more for our audiences. Thanks very much, both of you, for joining us.